Now let's have a look at methods Json.stringify, and later we'll see a method Json.parse. These methods are used to convert native JavaScript objects or arrays, like native JavaScript structures, to JSON. These methods are used to do that transformation and vice versa. So let's first start with Json.stringify. It converts a JavaScript object or value to JSON string. So let's say this thing is a native JavaScript object, right? So this foo, you can understand that there is no quote, and this bar is like single quote string, right? So this is a native object, but if you pass that object to json.stringify, then you get output something like this, that it is a string. This single quotes is denoting the string. If you print, obviously that quotes will not be printed, but it is a string where the contents of that string is a JSON. So and that is a valid JSON, which means that that key is needed to be in double quotes, and all the strings also have to be in double quotes. So all that transformation is automatically done for us by this JavaScript method automatically. Okay, so if we have an object, okay, and it can be any object, let's say a5 foo bar, and when I normally print this object and type of object, then we will see that this thing is a normal object and its value is printed, right? But and its type is object. But let's say I create a JSON string. So this is now JSON. The method is capital JSON dot stringify, and in that you pass whatever obj, and later we'll say that you can pass a lot of things. But if you log this JSON, then you'll see that you are getting a string. In order to prove that, you can again write a type of string, type of JSON, right? And then you will see that you will get a proper string. So this whole thing is the output of JSON stringify. It is a string which is representing raw JSON. Now this is like a normal string, right? This is the output we got. This is a string. Now this thing you can take and send it across from client to server or server to client, because now it is a valid JSON, right? Now the other party, when it receives, then again it sees it like a raw simple string, right? There is a way which is called json.parse, which we'll look next, which converts this raw representation of JSON into native JavaScript objects, or for that matter other types. So it can be arrays also, we saw that. Okay, so all those transformation will be automatically done by parse, and here this transformation from native object to JSON string is again automatically done using json.stringify. Again, let's see a few more things. So we know that it can be a array also, right? So instead of this thing, instead of stringifying an object, if we have simple array, which is, let's say, 1 2 3, and for the let's firstly comment this, and instead of obj, let's pass arr. This is an array. This is an array. So array can also be converted to JSON. We saw that, right? And so you can see that this thing is converted to string, right? This thing is converted to string, and you can see the type of his string. Note that the this stringify is different from we have already had a two string thing, right? So if you print two string, then also it represents a representation of this array as stringified version, right? So you see something like this is printed, but you can see that this is not a valid JSON. Why? Because there are no square brackets here, right? Basically toString is just used for sort of representational stringified representational purpose or of any JavaScript structure, right? But json.stringify gives a proper string which is a valid JSON, which is a valid JSON string, right? So that is the difference between this. We will come back to it again, but for the time being I just said that. Next, Again, note that all the intricacies are automatically here. So let's say here I have comma. This is a valid syntax in JavaScript, right? But when it is converted to JSON string, then still it is a valid JSON. You see that there is no comma. So internally, it all, if it is a valid JavaScript object, then it is automatically converted to a valid JSON string with all the intricacies, right? Whatever is transformation is needed. Again, there are ways to fine tune those transformations, which we will come next in the Json Stringify advanced section only. Okay. Apart from that, it's not that only objects and arrays can be converted. Raw values can also be converted. Okay, so it's not so it's like, you see, it converts a JavaScript object like array or normal plain object, or value also. So any value can also be stringified to a valid JSON, right? So for example, true, right? Now if you, this true is boolean true, okay, but when you stringify it, it returns a string true. This is a number true, but when you stringify, then it returns a string 5, right? This is a number 5, this is a string 5. Okay, and again, like new string constructor is there, and you can create that, you can use that to create strings. Similarly, there is something called new number, right? So all the other things are similar. So like earlier we had like as we can create like string like this also, right? Or we can create string from string constructor also, and we can pass hello. Okay, and we saw that now this s dot has all the things, like includes, or to lowercase to uppercase, all the things which are needed, everything is there on this object. However, we can get the string, it's a stringified version back by doing s dot toString. Okay, and we also saw that we also have s dot value of, and this will represent the core value using which this string object was created, and that is the past hello. So this will also be the same thing, right? But this will not be always the same thing, right? So for example, let's say I have a number n, and again I could have created this number directly, like using 10, that is fine. But let's create using a constructor number. There's a constructor number, and now if you see, then this thing is no more a number, right? If you print n, then you can clearly see that sorry, n, you have to pass some value, so 10, yeah. So using so it is now an object, it is not of type numbers. You can see it clearly by writing type of n, and you can see that it is an object, right? Not a number only. However, those things which were available here, right, toString and value of, they are available here also, right? So you can write n dot toString, or you can write n dot value of, right? And then you will get accordingly 10. But see the difference. In this case, both of these are not string. One is string, but another is number. So now you see the difference between value of and toString. ToString always represents a stringified representation, like of the object. Yeah, and you can customize it. But the point is that by default there is a stringified representation, that any object, if it has to be visible somewhere on console or something in a stringified form, how it should look. That is how, right? So this number in string format should look like this. This hello should look this. But since this was a string constructor, so its value of was also a string. But now you see that this thing is the constructor which was the value which was passed to the constructor was a number, right? And that's why when you write value of, it gives you that particular core value with which it was initialized, right? And that thing is 10, number. And that's why this, with a different color, you can see this is the number. In order to prove that this is a different thing, you can simply write type of, and then you can see that, yeah, this thing is a string, this 10 is a string, and this thing is a number, right? But in this case, both are strings. Okay. But what we were discussing is that, yeah, so you can very well let's remove all this. this is a number, but like you can do JSON dot stringify, and you can pass anything, let's say uh, true, false, or let's say 5, 10, all these values you can pass, and they will return your stringified version. So again, if you write type of, obviously this is stringify always returns a so in white color thing, whatever is coming is generally string, and something is printed in sort of orange color in VS Code, then that is generally number, right? So that is easy to identify while you are printing on the console that what is what data type. Anyways, so you can clearly see that these two are these things return a string. True boolean is converted to true string. 5 number is converted to 5 string. And again, as discussed earlier, you could provide here a new number and like that, whatever, also, right? Let's say 50 or 40, right? Then that is also a string. In fact, we already have a string number object, right? N. So we can pass that, and we'll see that this is yeah, 10, but this 10 is string, right? This 10 was the number passed. Okay, but the point is that JSON Stringify, apart from like objects, it also transforms supported values, right? So what are the supported values? We earlier saw, right? We earlier saw that string is supported, number is supported, boolean value true false is supported, null is supported, but undefined or something like that is not supported, right? So we'll see that next. But number means that this 5 is supported, 5.2, 5.8, anything, that thing is also supported. And this is important. If you convert a string which is already a string to a string, then it represents your string which is a stringified double quote representation of that string. You understand what is the difference? So you can understand that yeah. So let's see some Ola you are writing now. This thing, if you write using json.stringify, then you understand that I have taken this string, and this you can write in template, literal, in double quotes, in single quotes, like it is your wish, right? Internally it is represented as a native JavaScript string, but that native JavaScript string is taken and it is stringified, and what it returns? It returns a valid string which should be which should be a value of JSON, right? So you understand what is the difference? See, here you were, when you were doing true, and it converted into a string without quotes. Here it is converting it with quotes, double quotes. Why? Because this true, as it is like a string, when as it is somebody will see true in JSON, then it will know that this true is supported, because true false we saw that it is supported. This 5.8 in it is in JSON somewhere, like in JSON somewhere this 1 is written. This is supported, right? Because this is a number, right? But if, and this is false, like this, or true, like this. So when and this whole thing is a string, right? So in that same sense, when we get some 5.8, we get some 10, only 10 without quotes, we get some true false, we know that these are supported, right? But if we want to signify that something is a string in JSON, then we have to put double quotes in that, right? And that's why whatever string you gave, that is fine, but when it converts it to a value which is valid in JSON, right, then it returns your string, with quotes. You understand? So if you want to define something like this, then you cannot simply write this, like this, right? Because if you write something like this, you see this is coming without quotes, right? Without quotes. So basically a string with the contents of Ola in double quotes. So actually the string is not Ola, the string is Ola in double quotes. This whole thing is the value of the string, right? And that is what it is equivalent to, and that is how it converts strings when you apply json.stringify to this thing, JSON when you call json.stringify to a native JavaScript string, right? And now you can clearly see that this thing, this thing is not equivalent to, see, you can clearly see that this thing is not equivalent to normal string Ola, right? That is obvious. It should be false, right? And in a similar manner, if you say this thing, then this thing is not equal to S, right? S was normal string Ola, but this is Ola in quotes, and that's why this will be also false. So just a nuance, sometimes people confuse. And when I am writing it here in quotes, in double quotes, so basically just ignore the quotes, because when you print on a screen, that quotes will not. It just signifies that this is a string, that nothing else. Next, let's see a few more formats. So we know that exponentiation thing is supported, right, in JSON, right? So you can write like this, but when it is converted, then JSON Stringify writes it like 500, right? Okay, so this is a smaller number. Maybe that's why it is doing like that. Let's do a number which is bigger. So JSON.stringify, and I know that normal 5, 10, etc. will be available. Is available. I know that. But let's write 5e4. Okay, and this should be also a small number, right? But let's say I write 5e24. Then you see that the the valid thing which is returned by JSON Stringify is in the format of E format, right? So for smaller things, it just adds zeros. But if you write a bigger index, then it will not write 5 followed by 24 zeros or something. It will write like this. And now it proves that this is a valid format in JSON, right? But if you do something like this, OX, right, and then this thing, right, which is a hexadecimal number, or O12, right, then also it will convert it internally into decimal, and this is the only format which is supported, right? So natively inside JSON, this octal or hexadecimal is not supported, which means that when you are writing some value, right, when you're writing some value, you can write it 1, 10, 20, 10.5. These are supported. But and also you can write 5e, 5e5, 5e4. E format is also supported, right? But this format is not supported, which means that 012 or 0x12 octal hexadecimal, you cannot directly write here 0x12. That will give you a parsing error, and that we can clearly test. Right now we cannot test because we have not studied that function. There is a function called json.parse, which to which you pass a valid valid JSON string, and it then converts it back into this JavaScript objects or values. So there, when you try with something like this, let's say user ID and let's say 0x12 or something, then it will give you error. We'll see there, right? So, but other way around, when you convert hexadecimal or octal to JSON, then I know that hexadecimal and octal are not supported, but that is my knowledge. But internally JavaScript handles it directly, that without you telling anything, even if you pass hexadecimal, this is valid in JavaScript, right? So like this foo in without double quotes, this is valid in JavaScript, right? And that's why you can pass this, and JavaScript will internally this JSON.stringify will internally see that how to represent that so that it is a valid JSON, right? Similarly here, you can pass octal and hexadecimal, and it is valid in JavaScript, right? But when internally JSON.stringify will stringify it, make a string representation of it, then automatically it will represent in decimal number, so that because hexadecimal and octal are not supported, right? Next, again, we can do the same thing with arrays also. We saw it in fact earlier, right? That if you pass an array and do JSON.stringify, it returns you a string which is a valid JSON string, and that's why it should be in quote. And we saw that if you simply do toString, yeah, it is good for like just printing on console or something, but it is not a valid JSON because it has no square brackets, right? And that's why these two are completely different. However, many times when we want to simply convert something, let's say some number 528 to string, right? 528 to string, or 528 or 552.8 to string, let's say, right? So anything like 52.8 dot to string. Then you can clearly see that this 52.8 as string has come here. Okay. And in a similar manner, you could have done with arrays also, right? That is fine. But the point is that you could have also done JSON.stringify and 52.8, right? Both work fine. But actually this syntax is more frequently used, like, understand, even if you don't have to send data from client to server, nothing JSON is needed, just you want some string representation of your number, then also this thing is sometimes needed. So let's say I have a number 52, right? 52, right? And const, let's say n is equal to 52, right? And I want to I just need a string s, which should be a string representation. Then there are, obviously we know that there are many ways, right? One way is that I can write 52 plus empty string, that is also fine. I could use a template literal, and inside that I can embed that 52 or n directly, that is also valid, right? But one of the ways is n dot to string, this will also work, right? And another way is this json.stringify, and this will also work, right? Now you might think that both are similar, but some cases actually it is not that easy. So for example, earlier we converted 52.8, let's try to convert 52. So for json.stringify it will be like pretty simple, right? json.stringify 52, it will return a string 52 clearly, right? Let's try to do the same thing with 52 dot to string, 52 dot to string. Now you see some syntax error is coming, you see some syntax error is coming. Actually the problem is that when you write after some integer some dot, then it expects that it is decimal number, then it should be something like 52.5. What is this 52 point t, right? Understand? And that's why you have to, even if it is a pure like complete integer, you have to write 52 point like if it is decimal, then you saw that it is working fine. But even if it is not decimal, then also you have to write 52.0 dot, and then it will work, you understand? And then it will work. But then you understand, so or if you have it in a separate variable, then on that variable you can directly do dot to string, that is fine. But this is like this is so that's why I said that json.stringify is used by JavaScript developers at many places where like we don't need JSON transformation or JSON sending from client to server. Just for simple transformation to string, also this thing is used many times, right? Okay. And we earlier saw that null is valid, but so let's create a string s1 is equal to json.stringify, and you pass null, and we saw that like true, false, number and strings, like similarly null is also a valid JSON entity, right? Now if you print s1, then obviously you can see that null is printed, right? And in order to see clearly, you can see that it is it's a string, right? This null is in quotes, right? It is a string, right? Here null is like object, JavaScript object, but this s1 is now this thing null in quotes, right? Or double quote, whatever. Basically it is a string. Okay, try to do the same thing with undefined. So let's say const s2, and let's try to do json.stringify and undefined. We know that undefined is not valid. In JSON, right? So how do you so what happens when you try to convert invalid thing, right? So we saw that invalid, in case of numbers, invalid thing was octal, hexadecimal, so it automatically converted it into decimals to make it valid. But undefined is not valid, and there is no equivalent also of that it cannot be converted into something, right? So because undefined string is completely different thing, right? I'm saying that it can be any xyz. It's just that its value is undefined. That is completely different. Now this thing is undefined data, undefined value, which is like a separate data type in this thing, JavaScript, right? That thing we are trying to stringify, like trying to create a JSON out of it. What will happen? Let's print s2. We see that undefined is printed, but you can see that the color is slightly different. Actually, it is not a valid, like it is not undefined in quotes. You understand? It's not that it has successfully converted this into a string undefined, right? It is actually still undefined object. Undefined object means undefined type, which is in JavaScript, right? So if you write type of s2, then you will see that its type is not string, its type is undefined, which means that this is undefined data type. Now json.stringify always returns string, so why it is returning undefined? So that is the behavior of stringify. json.stringify always returns string, but sometimes if it is not able to convert, something into valid JSON, then it returns undefined. And if it returns undefined, it means that the transformation was unsuccessful. So whatever you are trying to do, this just does not make sense to me, right? And that's why this is undefined. So when you do json.stringify, then whatever the value you are getting, you should check that it should not be undefined. If it is undefined, that means that it has failed. Whatever thing you passed, which you are trying to convert it into JSON, that has failed. Okay. Otherwise, in all the good cases, it will always return a string. And if it returns a string, then that is a valid JSON. Okay. So this is what we are talking about, that when it do something like this, is undefined, and this is like not other cases. It is not string. This thing is like normal undefined data type. Okay. Now let's try to do the same thing with so foo null, and when I stringify it, then yeah, null is a valid object, valid thing in JSON, right? So it will create this thing foo in quotes and null not in quotes. So if null will be in quotes, then it will be a string null. It is not null string. It is null data which you are passing, right? And that null data is valid in JSON, and that's why without quotes that null is there. Like for example here, without quotes true is there, without quotes false is there, without quotes 1 is there. It knows that these are supported types, right? Similarly, null is a supported type in JSON, and that's why it is perfectly valid. The key has to be always string, and that's why it is in double quote, and the value is null, which is supported. But if you write something which is unsupported, for example foo undefined, this is a valid JavaScript object, but this thing is not supported in JSON, and that's why when you try to convert this into JSON, then it will basically remove this altogether. So let's say two three key value pairs are there, right? Then rest everything will be there, and this thing will be dropped because this is not supported, right? So it will not throw you some error or something. It will just silently discard this key value pair when you're trying to convert it into JSON. And right now there is just one key value pair. So when this is discarded, then you get an empty, not object, it is like a empty curly braces which represents a JSON with no key value pair, right? Because this is not a JavaScript thing, right? So that's why we cannot say it empty object. Okay. JSON.stringify again, same thing. But this is slightly different. You see, the behavior in objects and the behavior in arrays is slightly different. In objects, if you use undefined or let's say any invalid thing, right? Then uh, it will try to convert. So for example, if I try to convert something which is invalid, but if it can do that automatically, then it is fine. So for example, if I do json.stringify and I do, let's say 1 2, and then in hexadecimal I write let's say 1 5, right, and 10, whatever. And when I print this, when I print this I did not intend. I intended an array having these 4 values. This is what I intended. So you can see that, yeah, automatically it tried to convert this, because see, this is not supported, but it knows that it is a number, so I will convert it into like 1 into 16 plus 5, which is 21. So it converted, right? But if you pass something, so let's say null is still valid, right? Null is still valid. So it yeah, gave you null as it is. That's fine. But if you write something like undefined, then you see what happens. It converts undefined to null. It does not remove it. In objects, whatever invalid key value pairs were there, they were dropped, they were removed. In array, it is not removed, but rather it is invalid things are replaced with null. And why is that? That is because arrays, the key value pairs in objects have no ordering. Like, they are just keys and values. Whatever is invalid, you can drop them. That is fine. And if you now access something dot foo, then it is not there, so it will give you undefined. That is fine. But in case of arrays, it is very much like this many items are there, and this is the index of 4. If you drop it, then like index of 4 will now become 2 rather than 3. So now this might be problem, right? When you are dependent on Json Stringify, and then let's say Json parse, and then you are dependent on that parsing logic, and let's say you are using that code somewhere else, then that might create problems. That's why JavaScript will not change the length of the array, but keeping the length of the array same, but still some values are invalid, so they handle it by replacing it with null. Okay, now there is something called replacer function. So earlier we saw that all the things which we are getting, right, all the things which we are getting, we are passing in Json Stringify. There is just one data, like some one data, right? Something one piece of data we are passing, and that is transformed automatically. What if your requirement is something different? That, you know what, when some invalid thing is coming, then I don't want it to be replaced by null. I have my custom logic that no, I want it to be replaced with -1, or let's say something XYZ, my string, something. Okay, whatever is your requirement. How do you tell? How do you tell Stringify of your custom logic? That is called the replacer function. It is used as the second argument. So after this first argument, you can pass here a function. So you can see this VS Code is also suggesting that there is a function which you can pass, replacer function, and that will take key values, keys and value. Right? We'll see that soon. So basically, it is a function that takes 2 arguments, the keys and the values of the whole JSON which is trying to be constructed. Each whole JSON is like a key value things, right? So I'm trying to create something of this sort, where I want my custom logic to be present, and that is where replacer function comes in. We'll see that where things are different. So for example, normal strings I'm converting, then what happens, we'll see that. But firstly, let's see normal scenarios. Now, normal scenario, the replacer function is called with an empty string as key representing the object being stringified, and then called on each property on the object or array being stringified. Which means that if you have, let's say, some object, let's say obj is equal to foo and bar, let's say, and let's say I have another key, let's say a5. Okay, now what they're trying to say is that when you do something like this, so json.stringify, and you pass obj, this is straightforward, right? This is straightforward, and you get a string. But let's say I want to write my custom replacer function, right? This custom replacer function I can define. So let's say function, this thing I can define. This takes key and value as 2 arguments. Okay, and if you want to see And by default, if you don't want to change anything, then just return value, just return value. So right now, firstly run it. Okay, then you see, okay, I passed it at in invalid place. Okay, so this thing is like second argument of console log. I want to pass it as a second argument of JSON Stringify, right? So this is JSON Stringify. JSON Stringify's first argument was already only one thing was being passed, but now the second thing, like replacer, is passed. Okay, so if you do it, then you can see that, yeah, whatever was the earlier behavior, still the same behavior is there, nothing is changed. So if you simply have a replacer, and that replacer gets two things, key value, and if you return simply value, then nothing happens. Like, this is the default behavior. However, here comes the interesting part. Now you can write your custom logic here if you want some different transformation. I want to, like, make all the numbers 10 times while I'm stringifying, right? 2 I want to make 25, I want to make 50, whatever. If it is number, if it is not number, then I want to don't touch it. Let's say that is my custom requirement, we do whatever reason, right? Then how do you achieve that? That side kind of sophisticated custom logic can be written inside this replacer function, which JavaScript provides you. Now firstly, let's see that how many times this thing is called. How many times this thing is called? Okay, so this is interesting. We have only two keys, right? But it is called three times. You can see clearly that it is called three times. Okay, why it is the case? Let's print the key also. Let's print the key also, and we'll see that, yeah, okay, key is a, key is foo, and then some empty string, like nothing is printed, right? That is what it is mentioned here, that the replacer function is called with an empty string. See, the replacer function is called with empty string as the key representing the object. So basically, you can understand that something like this. Let me give you an example with in comments. Yeah, so something like this, that you can understand that, yeah, the key is a, its value is 5. The key is foo, its value is bar. You can understand, right? In a similar manner, you can understand that when the replacer function is first triggered, it thinks something like this, that the key is empty string. The key is empty string, its value is the whole object, the whole thing which you are trying to transform. You can understand it like this. Okay. Now, why this thing is important? Because whatever thing you are returning from inside replacer, that is actually recursively in a nested manner, that is used by replacer to decide that whether I have to go further and again. So you understand. So first time key was, see, empty, and what did you return? Value. In the value, this whole thing was there. If you want to prove that, you can print value also. You see the key was empty string, in the value whole, the thing on which you are starting, right? That thing is given. Now when you return that thing, if that thing is not a primitive thing, you understand, like hello string, or let's say true value, or 10.5 some number, if that is not a primitive thing, right? If that is some object or some sort of array, right? Then what happens, that you are telling that recursively go and again do the transformation on internally on its all values, and then stringify it accordingly, right? Because it has to go everywhere to search for whatever the transformation logic you want to apply. Now you are returning the whole thing, and that's why it is now going inside this thing, and it is going that now I have to go to its internal thing, so a 5 and foo bar, right? Okay, so what happens if again this thing is an object? So let's say a, and this thing is again an object, and let's say this thing is again I don't know, like b20, whatever. Okay, let's see clearly what happens now. So you see, a stringified version is coming, everything that is fine. But I'm just watching what is key value pairs. Initially, empty string whole thing is passed. Now you see that earlier for a5 you were returning. If for a5 you are returning, then it is saying that it is done. It is done. I don't need to do anything more. But now you see that the rather than 3 times, it is running 4 times. Why? For a now you returned this value b20. Now you are again, this is not primitive type, right? This is this is an object. Now this tells replacer to again recursively go inside that and again run replacer inside that, and that's why you see again one time b20 this thing is running. It is going deep inside. This is called depth first search. You don't need to go into those things, but the simple logic is that it will traverse your whole tree structure, if you understand. Okay, because this whole thing you can understand tree, right? Like this, there is one node and it has two children, let's say a and foo, and then foo has just bar, but here a can have like again two children, let's say b20 and c30, whatever. So you can understand that the whole object is sort of a tree and you have to traverse that tree. Okay, and that is how it is going to happen internally. Okay, why it is important? Because if you don't need to understand in much detail, but you should understand this sort of structure, this sort of traversal sort of behavior you should understand, right? Then only you can understand how things are working. Because for example, let's say here, rather than value, I simply return hello. Then you see what is the answer. My answer is directly hello. Everything is gone. Everything is gone, right? When I was returning value, then the whole thing was returning. When I'm returning hello, then it's not that it has taken like values. It looks like it looks like here that value, instead of value I'm returning hello, right? So you might think that I am returning 5, then all the values will be replaced with hello. So a hello and foo hello, that will be the answer. But that is not the answer. The whole answer is hello. Why? That you can understand only when you understand this, how this structure, how this thing is working. So basically, for this thing, you see, when the first time it was called with empty string, then rather than returning the value, you returned hello. And as we discussed, if you don't return if you don't return a non-primitive type, then like if you return a primitive type like some number or hello or anything, then it thinks that that is the value, final value, right? So I don't need to traverse inside, and that's why it has not started the traversal of a and foo, right? It has not started. If you want to see that exact behavior, what I was saying, then you can customize here, right? I can write something like this, that if key is not equal to empty string. If it is not equal to empty string, then only return hello. Otherwise, which means that when key is exactly is equal to empty string, which is the first case, then return value. Okay, if you do something like this, then you see that you got this thing, a hello and foo hello, right? Which I told you earlier, that which might be your expectation in the first time. But so what happens, that the first time when for empty string this thing was passed, then you are saying that no, I'm returning that value, not hello, I'm returning the value, which means that go inside that and again do traversal inside that. When I'm starting traversal, then a5, instead of 5 you are returning hello, so that is replaced. Foo bar, and instead of bar which is again a simple string, but you're returning hello, but then that is replaced with hello. That is fine. Those things are fine, right? But if you understand that logic, then you can use this replacer function very powerfully. Let's try one more final thing. What happens when I pass this on a normal something? So let's say a normal hello, right? And let's keep everything simple right now, which means that the default behavior I just want to see. Okay, so you see that what is happening is that the empty for empty string, the initial key is empty string, and for that the value is not an object, because this thing which you are stringify is not an object, it's a string, right? And which is a primitive type, and since it is a primitive type, then directly you are returning that, which means that you are saying that yeah, there is nothing to traverse, there is nothing to traverse further, and that's why the whole answer is again hello, right? In quotes, and that it transformation it will do. But now you understand how the replacer is working. So yeah, here we can see that we can, as I mentioned here, you can use in another way also. For example, a5 foo bar is there, replacer function is passed, and the key value. You are saying some this custom logic that key dot starts with f. If it starts with f, then return undefined. Yeah, again, one thing I did not say, that if you return undefined, then that thing is deleted. That thing is deleted. So right now, when let's say obj was passed, right? then then let's say I say that yeah, see, right now everything is working fine, the whole thing is a5 foo bar as expected. But let's say I say that if my value, let's say type of my value is, if this is number, then I don't want to include this. Then if you don't want to include this, you return undefined. If you return undefined, that thing will be deleted. In case of objects, in case of strings, in case of arrays, it will be replaced with null. We'll see that later. But the point you are understanding that what will happen? So initially the value will be what? The whole object, so it will not satisfy. Later when it will go inside, then the value will be 1 time 5, 1 time bar. So I am saying that when it is bar, don't do anything. When it is 5, then the type of value is equal to number, this thing will be satisfied. Then for that case return undefined, which means that discard that case. And when I run this thing, then you see that a5 is discarded, only foo bar is there. So when I stringify this thing, then only these things are coming, this thing is gone. And similarly here you will see that let's say key dot starts with a key. I'm not checking value, I'm checking key. And key will be what? A and foo, these things will be key. We can clearly see that A and foo, these are the keys, right? When key starts with F, which is the case in this case, right? Then return undefined. So I'm saying that don't include this. And that's why the answer is A5. So foo bar is deleted. However, in case of arrays, it is slightly different. We saw earlier example also that in arrays, because they don't want to change the index of various things, that's why they will not delete that array. Rather they will delete that item in the array. Rather they will replace that with null, right? So similarly, it is happening here. So I am saying that replacer function is a thing which is doing like when key is equal to 0. Key is equal to 0. So this is also important. When you iterate it on array, let's see the key value. Let's see the key value things. Okay. So let's write. Let's say one thing is hello and another thing is world. Okay. And this is array. So let's give a proper name to it. Yeah. And everything is fine, just default. Let's see what is printing. You see, again with empty string, the original thing is passed, right? So the value is the whole thing, hello world, which is array, right? And then again it since this is like not a primitive type, so it goes inside, then iterates. And when it iterates, now it is not an object, so key value, what will be key, what will be value. So in case of arrays, the keys are the indices and the values are the items, right? So this is not an object, this is an array. So it will be iterated like this will be iterated as 0 hello, this will be iterated as 1 world. So that is what is happening, right? And you can see that it is white color, which means that this key and value, these are strings. Okay, these are strings, not value. Value is actually depends on what is the value in your passed thing, but key will be always a string, right? You can test that type of key. If you pass, then you can see that that thing is a string, right? So okay, so which means that it is passed with 0 string 1 string. Can I make use of that? Exactly, I did that here, which means that this will be passed as 0 string key 1 string key and its value is 2, and 2 string key and its value is hello. 0 1 2, these are the keys and values are 1 to hello, that is fine. If the key is 0, which is I'm talking about this thing, then return undefined, which means essentially I'm trying to yeah, I'm trying to not use one, but I cannot delete it like objects as discussed earlier. Then it will be replaced with null. So you can see that in the final answer, it is null, comma 2, comma hello. So hello is like valid, and again it will be converted into double quotes because that is a valid thing in JSON. But you can see that one is like not sort of removed but replaced with null. Now, one final thing, the replacer function is there, right? Actually, this second argument, rather than this being a function, this can be an array also. And it has a special meaning. If the replacer is an array, then the array's value indicates the name of the properties in the object that should be included in the resulting JSON string. Which means that if this thing is the thing, then what are the keys? Keys are A, B, foo. Then what are the keys which you are interested in? If that is your simple requirement, then you can pass an array and pass as an array of strings that what are the keys I'm interested in. I'm interested in A and B only. So when you run this, then only you will get A and B. This foo will be ignored. If you add foo here, then only it will come, otherwise it will not come, right? So that is the simple way in which this replacer can be used as an argument, a second thing can be used as an array argument rather than a function argument. And this thing applies recursively, which means that obj you can see that a5 and b a10 foo bar. So basically what is happening, you are saying that a and b, now this a b, and you can see that b is again a nested object which has a and foo. So again it will go inside and it will only nested, again it will only cater to the keys which are mentioned here. So the mentioned keys are a and foo, and that's why it will be a, b, and inside b again this foo will be deleted. So only a is there. So don't think that these things are first level keys, right? Whatever, like any level, whatever keys you want to keep, just provide that. Okay, so that is how the replacer as an array works. Now the one another thing is the space argument in the stringify. So rather than two arguments, there is also a third argument which is used to control spacing in the final string. Okay, so we earlier saw that, yeah, this thing, if I have a complicated this thing, and if I simply write Json Stringify, this null is like if you don't want to, if you want to use the third argument, and but you don't want to use a replacer. If you want to use replacer, then go ahead and use it definitely. But let's say I don't want to use any replacer, but I want to use a space argument, which is a third argument. So you can pass the replacer null, and that will act as like do nothing. Okay, but the discussion here is around the third argument, which is what? Which is used to control space. So if you don't provide anything, let's say third argument, then this whole thing will be like one mammoth long string without any space. So if it is like you can understand that if it is like complicated, something like this, you can understand, right? Something like this, and you create an object out of it, let's say, yeah, and log obj, then you can clearly see that, yeah, at least when JavaScript is trying to print it, then it is at least giving you color or something, but still it is bad. But it will be worse if you convert it into JSON.stringify and you convert it into string version like JSON. If you convert it into in JSON, then you can see that like this is like whole thing is just one string, and you can clearly see that if like lots of properties, lots of values are there, then this is going to be very tedious to read, because if this thing is more long, you can understand that. So it can be like it can be an array having let's say three values like this, right? Whatever, then you can clearly see that this thing is going to be like very cluttered. You just cannot understand where is what. For that, and let's for now take example of only one item. So for that, what is happened is that so second is a replacer. I don't want to use replacer. Third is space. I can provide space. So let's say 2 is the space, and if you print that, then then it will be like a proper representation, right? So right now it is an array, but let's say it was not an array, it was like a normal thing, right? So normal object, that is also fine. Okay, so you can see that now I am getting it like this, like formatted, rather than just some sort of garbage. Okay, and this is why 2 is like a standard, but you can use like 4 also. Like this is like how much spacing, indentation, how much you want to give. If you give 4, then you can see that the indentation is slightly more, that is fine. Okay, so yeah, you can clearly see that this thing is now formatted clearly like this. One more thing, this thing, if this is a number, let's say 2, 4, then this thing means that these many spaces are needed, right? However, this thing, the spacer argument, this thing can be a string also. So instead of 2 number, you can pass a string also. And if you pass that string, then that string is used as the spacer, whatever thing you want. So if I want to exactly simulate this, then I will pass here a string with 2 spaces. You can understand, if I one space also I can pass, then it is like very less indentation. So better like 2 is the like most preferred. So yeah, two indentation, right? And again you can write like a 4 indentation, that is fine here. But the idea is that whatever string you are using, now that will be used as a replacer rather than because now it is not a number, whatever you are saying, that is happening. That is what it is mentioned here, that if you do 2 spaces or 4 spaces, whatever, then that will be used as a replacer. But now since it is a string, I have much more control over it, right? I can customize my thing. So rather than the 2 spaces, I can use 2 dots, and then it can be something like this. Or I can use a pipe and space, okay, something like that. So you can understand that those things can be helpful when you clearly want to say. So for example, let's say I am having some complicated object is there, right? And yeah, I'm doing with space, that is fine. But I want to see that this address is ending where, whether thing is so you can understand that you see here, that here you see that this slightly grayed lines are there, which says that where which bracket is ending. You can simulate the same behavior here, right? Let's say I can write a this thing space like pipe and then space. Let's see what happens. So yeah, you can see that, yeah, now it is saying me that address is ending here. And you can understand that there are many use cases where these things can be helpful. But let's say I simply use dot dot, then these things will be replaced with simply dot dot. Okay, whatever the spacing is there, indentation is there, right? Okay, one thing is about serializing references. So what happens sometimes is that in JavaScript objects there can be circular references. What do I mean by circular references? Which means that let's say obj1 is a5. Let's write this example so it will be better. So there is an object 1, which is, let's say, a5 and foo bar. Okay, and then there is let's say some next object, right? And which is, let's say, obj2, and that is let's say normal hello world. Okay, now you see, if right now if I print obj1 and obj2, they are straightforward, like I have not done any connection or something, right? This is straightforward. What if I do obj1 like dot b is equal to obj2? So obj1 has only a. Let's write something like obj1 dot b, which means that I'm creating a new. You can write something like this also, like b, but this will also work. Dot b is equal to obj2. What is happening in this case? If you print obj1, what will be printed? you can see that A5 foo bar, that was the original thing, and now additional one more key B is added with the value obj2, with the value obj2. You can clearly see, right? Till now it is fine, right? But in JavaScript you can do circular references also. What if inside obj2, inside obj2, I have a pointer of obj1? I can do something like this, right? Let's say obj2 dot x is equal to obj1. You can understand. So right, so in this thing, hello world, which was earlier obj2, right? I am adding, apart from hello, I am adding an additional key. I'm adding additional key, let's say x, and that thing is the original object. And what is the original object? Original object is the whole thing. But then original object has b also, and that b has this thing, and this thing is again having x, and that x has value which is the whole thing. So it is a circular reference, you can understand, right? So now if you print this, then you can see that JavaScript is complaining. But even though it is complaining, you can still see that it is like it did not give you any error, and it is like a proper thing still. So if you write simply type of obj, right, then it is like fine. Type of obj1, yeah, obj1, which means that yeah, it is everything fine. It is still an object. It is just saying that, you know what, the object right now you are working with is has sort of circular dependency, right? And this thing is valid while you are working in memory with JavaScript objects. But if you try to convert this type of thing into JSON, into like JSON, then it cannot convert it, like it cannot convert it directly, right? So actually there are libraries, you can Google it, by Douglas Crockford, like cycle.js. There are libraries which are written by the pioneers of JavaScript for handling these situations, but natively JavaScript does not support this, right? And most of the scenarios, 99% scenarios, you will also never face this thing, like in your projects, right? So I'll simply show you that it gives you errors, and I'll not solve it, right? Because JavaScript, in JavaScript, pure JavaScript, like there's no native solution to it, right? But let's try that out. So Json.stringify, and then I pass obj1. So I'm trying to stringify this obj1. You can see that it is giving error that circular, converting circular structure to JSON. So this is like what some error. So it cannot convert it, right? And that whole thing is because of this thing. If I don't have this thing, then everything is fine, right? Because that circular dependency was not created, and now it gives me a valid answer. So if you do circular, if you have a circular dependency, that cannot be serialized into a JSON. And that is just you have to keep in mind. Sometimes if you get that error, then you just think that yeah, something you did somewhere which is resulting into this, right? That would be all. This video is getting too much long, so Json Stringify is fine. Next video we'll learn more about some another method which is reverse of Json Stringify, that we want to convert stringified JSON into native JavaScript objects. That is called JSON.parse, which you will see in the next video.